Welcome to the Sojourn Podcast. I'm your host, Dan Gibson, and with my co-host, Josh Chambers.
I was not.
And we're so excited to be along on this journey as we sojourn on this temporary journey called life, seeking to discuss and talk from a Christian worldview as we encourage each other in Christ. So, man, we're so glad to be here. Take the music out because that's getting way more intense than I am.
Dude, I don't think anyone heard anything you just said.
Did they not? Was it so loud on my end? I heard it.
Was that a rave, bro?
Dude, we were rated. Like, that's like prime preacher territory, bro. You got the, you get up there and they start hitting the keys behind you, and you're like, Lord, I feel the spirit moving, you know?
Get ready for the cinematic, whatever you did.
Sojourn Podcast with Dan Gibson and Josh Chambers.
Yeah.
Oh, man. Dude, so so I'm Dan Gibson. This is Josh Chambers. And Josh, tell us a little bit about yourself, brother.
What do you want to know? You want to go like, we didn't really discuss. We talked about like testimony story kind of thing. So let me just give you a brief thing and then you take it over where you want to go with this. So
just give us your background, your role, maybe just a little bit about yourself, maybe your family, just a smidge.
Yeah. All right.
And what brought us together.
So I am, like you said, my name's Josh, married to, we've been married for August at 2024. This year was 10 years. So we're going on year 11 at this point. At the time of this recording, we have 3 kids. Sawyer is 8 right now, Titus, who is 6, and Aaron, who just turned 5. So it's just in our house at all times. But yeah, so Courtney, 3 kids. I'm the pastor at First Baptist Church in Monroe City, Missouri. If you don't know where that's at, it's northeast Missouri. So you're thinking
You're not alone.
Yeah, no one. I feel like it's a blip on the map. If you don't know where it's at, you're not alone. But yeah, small town, rural Missouri. I think we have 2,600 people, 3,000 people in town. So pretty small town.
Tom Sawyer knew where you were, though. Tom
That's
Sawyer
right.
knew exactly where you were.
Yeah, Tom Sawyer is all of that happened in Hannibal, which is like 20 minutes away. So the writing of those stories. So yeah, man, been here at in Monroe City for August. We'll be starting 4 years. So I'm going on year 4 at this point. Pastors, Massachusetts, I was church planting there with the North American Mission Board. And then, yeah. What all did you say? So that's a little bit about me. What else?
And then I'll talk about. So I'm Dan Gibson. I'm from Kirksville, Missouri, which is also, if you don't know where it is, it's not surprising, right? But in Kirksville, my dad's been the pastor of our church. So we moved here for 30 years, and so I served here and around Kirksville as a pastor. Around Missouri as a pastor. And now I work for the Missouri Baptist Convention as the next gen strategist. And so I get to help our 1,700 plus churches advance the gospel to reach the next generation. And so that's a lot of fun. I'm married to my wife, Judah. We are also coming up on 11 years, but like in a couple of weeks, we'll be 11 years on the 21st of December. As of the time of this podcast is filming. And so
I didn't know you were married longer than me. For some reason.
It sounds like
when did you get married? 2013. Okay.
December 13. Yeah. So
right
we got married and been married. Yeah, wonderful. Almost 11 years, bro. So we have 3 kids. So we have Hazel, who is 6, Opal, who is 5, and Beverly, who is I think she's still 15 months old. She may be 16 months old now. We're getting close to it. On the 20th of this month, she'll be 16 months. So of November, as of the time of this filming. Podcast. So that's I see. Let's see some of our interest. I enjoy board games. If you can't tell from behind me, that's my board game collection, which is there's a lot more.
How many do you have? How many do you think?
Probably north of 150. So they go all over the place. Like some of them are big. These ones are like full fledged. This one takes you about 20 minutes to play. These ones are like an hour, or so. This one right here can take upwards of like 12 hours with unexperienced players. It's awesome though.
I didn't know they made more, like when I think of board games, I just think of like Monopoly, and that's about it.
So every year, fun fact for everybody listening to the podcast, about 3,000 board games, 1,800 to 3,000 depending on the year, come out.
Jeez.
And so there's actually a massive, massive board game community that goes all around the world. So there's there's a huge following. There's a website called boardgamegeek.com, which is like essentially IMB for board games, Internet Movie Database. This is the board game database. And so
Did you say
it's like
IMB?
IMDb, show my Sorry, show my Southern Baptist roots right there. I always forget that one. It just come off right the same. So yeah, so that's kind of some of my hobbies and stuff. But but Josh and I, we met each other it's been about 3 years ago now, actually. So
Yeah, long time.
we
man.
were paired together at Super Summer. We were both large team leaders leading the Green School of week 1 of Super Summer, which is the Missouri Baptist Convention's camp. I wasn't working for the Missouri Baptist Convention at the time. I was pastor at a church in Moberly, Missouri, and Josh and I got paired up, bro, and the rest is history.
We can't get the details surrounding our first connection with each other, but it was interesting with it was just funny. It was a funny time. But yeah.
So yeah, Josh and I, let's just put it this way. There was a very awkward interaction that did not happen between Josh and I. It was the third party in the conversation. And I thought Josh was totally in it. Josh thought, I guess I was in it. But we were both sitting there going, what is happening? And I don't know. Maybe someday we'll have an episode where we can talk about that. But probably not not the day. But it was good. And we hit it off, and we've stayed friends. I work for the Missouri Baptist Convention now, so I direct that camp. But Josh comes in, does a lot of stuff for us with that still. And we've just become good friends. And through talking about that, it's kind of the origin of the podcast. Josh, you've done a podcast before, correct? For your church. And
I've done 2. None of them are like around anymore. One on, I can't remember what it was called, Everyday Theology. So it was like taking theological terms, making it like applicable to everyday life. I just didn't have the time. And it was me. I don't know. Have you ever done a podcast by yourself? Like, it's kind of boring. It's awkward. Like, you're just trying to talk to yourself. So I stopped doing that. And then so when we talked about doing it, I was very excited because I like talking to someone else other than just me. I feel like I'm not as cool when it's just me. I may not be as cool when I'm with other people, but
you're pretty cool, Josh. You're very cool. So I've done one once before. Just like, I think I did 6 or 7 episodes. It wasn't very long running. But my friend, one of the guys who worked in my youth ministry down in the Springfield area, we did one called the Multiply Media Podcast, which at that point I was doing I did like weekly and daily videos at different times on that for about 4 years. So it's just kind of that podcast running. And it was a lot of fun. I enjoyed it. But then I had a baby and like life just got busy, and then we moved away. And the same thing, I didn't want to sit there and do a podcast by myself. And it was like, I need someone to be my, someone to bounce off of. Is just how it's just more fun. It's more enjoyable. So I took a pause. And so it's been something that's always been in the back of my mind to keep doing, but just haven't done it. And then, when Josh and I started talking about this, we started talking about doing a podcast. What would that look like? And then we really settled on this idea of, we really wanted an everyday believers podcast that covered a variety of topics that we as pastors would enjoy listening to. Because really that's what ultimately you always want to do, right? You want to make something that you would enjoy yourself.
Right.
And so as we discussed that, what would be a good idea? We just thought, well, what if we did the Christian worldview, but not Al Mohler in the briefing, if you're familiar with that?
We should have suits, man. That's what we need to do, have full-on suits and say, today, November 15th.
On the briefing. With Dan and Josh.
Yeah. He's smarter than me.
Dude, Al Mohler, Al Mohler, for all those who may not know, is the president of Southern Seminary, but he's like one of the smartest men alive, and does this podcast where he hops on every day and just talks about world events, and he does an amazing job at it. But so we really want to just cover topics from across the gambit of church life. How do you find yourself in a good church? What does that look like? Maybe just general topics, maybe even just something happening, semi-current events. We don't want to get into, this happened or that happened, or we really want to stay positive as best we can on this as well, but things that drive us all forward to Christ, because ultimately the idea of the name was Sojourn is to basically be on a temporary journey, right? So when the Israelites were away from Israel, they would talk about that they were sojourning. They were leaving Israel for a season to go and sojourn somewhere else on this temporary journey. And if we are in Christ, we understand that this is not our home, but this is just the temporary place that God has us for eternity with Him. And so we want to sojourn well as we navigate this kind of toxic environment of today in many ways as well. And so that's kind of the idea of the podcast, the original. And really the vision is just that we hope that you as the listener are encouraged. One of the things we'd like to do in kind of like our structure and overall idea for this is Josh and I've talked about doing, like I said, current events, a weekly podcast is the aim to have it come out weekly, but it'll be we'll cover a variety of topics, but then specifically if you have questions, you can always tweet us. Goodness gracious. It's X now, whatever you call it. But you can also, this is our Instagram handle. So you can message us or comment on whatever social platform you're watching this on. And we'd love to have your ideas for what we could do for podcast episodes. But we're going to cover a variety of topics. It may be an article or something along those lines that we find interesting or a question that we find thought-provoking. But also once a month, we would like to do a book club because I don't know, Josh and I both enjoy reading, but it's always better to read when you have accountability with you. People who
Reading
are
with
doing
a
it
friend.
with always never read alone,
Yeah.
No, but we want to read, so we enjoy it. And I know many pastors, who I lead cohorts in my role at the convention, and so I know a lot of guys who just enjoy the fact that the cohorts offer. I'm gonna back away. That light's really hitting my face. But that those cohorts just offer a level of accountability. So we like to do once a month a actual book club episode. Now, I think though, Josh, I think we've talked about this. Make sure we're in agreement, but we'd like to do at the end of in 4 weeks from this 4 podcasts from this one, we'd like to do The Unhurried Pastor by Brian Croft. Is that good? Sound good with you, Josh?
Man, I'm all for it. I just got that book for Christmas, so I think you read it. I think you told me about it, and I haven't read it yet, so I'm excited.
And if you're watching this right now and you're not a pastor, you think, well, I don't need to listen to a pastor book, or you're a pastor think, well, this is just another time management book. That is not what this book is. It's really about your soul. And I think there's a lot of things that's applicable. So it would be more widely applicable to pastors, but I think even a lay leader, someone who's in church giving their life, I think would enjoy.
Well, and even,
reading this book.
like I said, I haven't read the book yet, so I don't know, but I think it's good for members of churches to read books about pastoral ministry because they get an idea of like what their pastors or what their leaders go through or what they struggle with. And so it can help them even pray more for their pastor, pray more clearly or specifically, and talk to them on different issues. So it could be good for everybody, I think.
I think it would. I mean, why do you think that is, that disconnect, Josh? Pastors, we're in one camp, and it seems like sometimes we drift away in our leaders. What do you think is the biggest thing that happens there as we drift from our members, maybe in our calling, but as well, how can we bring that together maybe to better understand one another?
Yeah. So are you asking like why is there a disconnect? It seems from what like our members see and like how we go through things.
Yeah. Like what's some of maybe the major disconnects that happen? And then maybe what's some ways that we can rectify that?
Man, it's a good question. I think sometimes, I don't know. I've heard from pastors where a lot of the struggles that they go through, a lot of things that they're dealing with have to deal with people in their congregation. And so it's difficult of who do they talk to without being, you don't want to gossip, you don't want to slander, and you don't want to give all that information away. So I think there's that tension there, what that looks like. So, and I understand that, but I don't know. I mean, I think it's because I haven't figured out that balance yet of how to really handle that. I mean, I'll tell people like there's things that I'm going through. There's things that I'm struggling with. Honest about some of my personal struggles and things that I'm dealing with and how the enemy is attacking me. So I don't know. I mean, to me, I feel like that's one of the biggest barriers to, like the disconnect between leaders and members is how to have those conversations. But also, I mean, there could on the negative end on like pastors don't care to connect with the people that they shepherd, which they, I believe elders or shepherds should smell like sheep. And so there's, they've missed their calling and they're not fulfilling what they're called to do. So I don't know. I mean, I'd love to hear your insight on there. I don't know how to best bridge that gap other than I'm pretty honest with people of there are like pastoral ministry is not easy. It's certainly joyful and I love it, but there are seasons where I'll just tell people like, hey, I'm struggling. Just pray for strength, pray for wisdom, pray for, whatever else. Here's kind of what I'm doing. But yeah, I don't know. What do you think?
I think, here's the thing. Church life is It's really like the Green Bay Packers. Okay, so the Green Bay, I know, right, bro? Listen, hear me out, man. So the Green Bay Packers are different than any other sports organization in the world. The Green Bay Packers are the only publicly owned team in modern sports.
I didn't know
right?
that.
So you can buy stock in the Green Bay Packers if there's some for sale. So basically, I think it's like $2,000, $2,500 a stock. The stock pays zero dividend. You can never sell the stock to anybody but the Green Bay Packers. And you don't get voting rights other than there's this like special meeting you can go to and you kind of hear an annual report, and then you can buy exclusive Packer ownership merch, but you have to buy it. Like they don't even give it to you. Right? But really what it is it's a contract between the fans of Green Bay and the fact that they will never leave Green Bay, Wisconsin. That's ultimately what the contract is, right? So it's a total trust between one another that we're going to do this, right? And so church life, you can't get a dividend. It means you don't get any money back from the money you give to the church. You invest your time, you invest your heart, you put your family, your life into it, and there's no dividend in a typical world sense, right? And you can't sell your stocks. You can leave, but you're not going to sell your stock. You're not going to make money back, right? And I think what we have to realize is that the walk as believers and as members of church is that members of the church is that this is a social contract in a lot of ways between ourselves, right? Like we're choosing to invest in one another. Ultimately, we're doing it for the glory of God, but our commitment to one another is free will. And I think there's sometimes pastors get this like, I'm the elder and I need to drive the sheep to where they need to go and they need to listen to me. And I heard a recent story by J.P. Tipton. J.P., if you're watching this, shout out to you, brother. He's the youth pastor at Emmanuel in Hannibal, not far from you, Josh.
I know. I just met him, actually. Sorry, I interrupted your whole flow. I just met him because his wife and my wife are friends. So I met him at Student Evangelism Conference. He's like, I need to know like what your face looks like because I hear my wife talk about you. And I was like, I hear the same thing. So yeah, anyway, shout out to JP.
JP's a big board gamer too, so shout out to JP for that. Hey, JP, you're really just getting some mad shouts right now, bro. Right. So I hope you're watching. So JP was telling me that we were at lunch a couple weeks ago, and he said his pastor was over in Israel, and he was watching them move the sheep around. And the gentleman said, see, there's a difference between America and here. Americans, when they shepherd, they use dogs and things like that to push their sheep. They drive them where they need to go. But shepherds here always lead their sheep. An important differential whenever the Lord talks about shepherding, right? And then he said he was driving around a couple days later, still on the trip. He looked over, he saw there's a shepherd driving his sheep. And he goes, well, look at that. There you go. They don't always lead their sheep. They drive them. He goes, oh, sorry. There is one time where we drive our sheep, and that's when we drive them to slaughter.
Wow.
I mean, dude, that'll preach right there.
Yeah.
Will preach right there. All right. And I think that in lies some of the issues, because here's the thing. I've come to the understanding that even in the worst situation when someone's being the nastiest they can be, whether it's a pastor, a deacon, an elder, just a random church member, typically their heart, I think, genuinely is to what they see the good of the church to be.
Yeah.
Now they may have horrible ways of going about it. They may be being deceptive in the nature in which they're doing it. There's a lot of wrong that can be happening in that. It's kind of like we can question people's understanding, their interpretation, but we can't question what they're thinking. Like that is what they experienced, but maybe they've interpreted what happened wrong. You know, like maybe you thought you saw a UFO, but actually it was just a balloon in the air or something. You know, it's just like you can question their interpretation of it. And I think that in lies is that we don't always come from that spirit of love to our flock. And if we don't love them, if we don't love our church as laity and as pastors, man, it's really hard to lead them. It's really hard. And I think, and to be led, because if I'm going to trust someone to lead me, I got to know that they have my best interest in mind. I think I've seen this in that my dad has been the pastor of our church for 30 years versus some of the churches I served in where a guy had been there for 4 years, you know, and you could tell that there was a love and there's a place where people will follow my dad where they may not follow someone else when it's a tough thing. It doesn't mean it's instant buy-in. He still has to be a caregiver of that love. But I think it's a big reason is just we don't give each other the benefit of the doubt of saying we really want what's best, even if we think maybe there's so much of like, well, this person's just out to kill the church or out to do this. It's like, I don't know of any pastor, Josh, I don't think you've ever met a pastor either, I'd imagine, that's gone and said, you know, I'm going to this church to kill it, bro. I'm going to drive it to zero.
Right.
That's just not the motivation of why you go there, right? Now, they may have a flawed view of how they're going to get there, and that's happened many times. It happens all the time. But their heart isn't to see the church decline. That's just not the game that they're wanting to play, right? I think that's a big thing that leads to disconnect in between our church and our leaders. I think that's where the unhurried pastor, going back to the original topic, is so fruitful, because it's a picture of patience and peace and how we kind of approach our ministry lives with one another. So looking forward to talking about that on the show here. And I think I'd love for you guys to, if you do, you pick it up and then message on this and let us know that you got it, and we'll look forward to talking about it for sure. So
Right on.
but yeah. So Josh, we are we're here. You know, what do you think? What's your goal, if you were to say at the end of this, for people who listen to the Sojourn podcast? What's your aim for why you want to do it?
I mean, personally, like for me, there's a couple things. One's like personal for me. I like thinking through things. I think I'm learning more or realizing more why like I should be talking about stuff. Like, you know, we may story at some other point, but you know, just some things I've struggled with in my past of like, I don't know. I just like to talk. Like it helps me think through things. So it's encouraging to me. It's edifying. So I like talking through cultural issues and navigating the Christian life. Having other people bounce that off of that's helpful. So I'm hoping to be encouraged in just personally, but also I would say on the other end of that too, of equipping the saints, you know, to like, here we are to glorify the Lord, and we're only here for a short amount of time. You know, in the grand scheme of things, let's say it's even 110 years, like it's a blip compared to eternity, but we are called by God to steward this time that he's given us for his glory. And what does that look like? How do we think through that? How do we navigate? You know, our citizenship is in heaven. So what does that look like for us today? I hope to equip people, Christians, pastors, ministry leaders, on how do we navigate life. So that's kind of my two things. But also getting you, that's fun. So we don't do it
Absolutely.
enough.
Good excuse to have a 45-minute or to an hour discussion every week, which I'm all for.
Yeah,
absolutely. And I think for me, you know, it's not like, I think when we sit there, you can think, well, these guys, do I just need to hear myself talk? Or do we, it's not that we're the greatest or the best or the only people that can get up and talk. It's not that. We were talking and praying before we started that it really doesn't matter necessarily how many people watch or listen to this. It's just a part of it, like being faithful and saying, you know what, for me, I think looking at ministry right now, there's just so much toxicity. It feels like there's just two sides right now of ministry or I say Christian media, right? There is the really ultra light and, you know, not a lot of challenge within it. That doesn't really, it's kind of just, hey, come as you are and stay as you are, right? Whereas Christ, we know, says, you know, Christ takes us where we are, but he doesn't leave us there by the grace of God. And really, we want to drive each other forward. Hebrews 10:24, undoubtedly one of my favorite verses. Take what you've, no, that's not, that's 2 Timothy. To spur each other onward to love and good deeds is that one. And then 2 Timothy is great too. Take what you've heard in the presence of many witnesses or of others and tell it to other men who will tell others also. That's a horrible paraphrase, but it'll do. But both those verses are near and dear to my heart. And I think too, looking at the other side of Christian media right now, it's all ultra negative. It's just, man, here's this pastor falling. And, you know, there was a high profile pastor who fell within a few weeks of the time of us filming, about a month or so. And it was kind of saddening to look at how many channels were putting up hour-long videos just dissecting this incident. And listen, I'm not saying we don't need to talk about when a brother falls and learn from it, but it was almost like, hey, let's get a video up because it's going to get views and traction right now. And I don't want to call all those people's hearts into question, but there is that unfortunate reality. So it's either A, we're sitting here breaking down and tearing apart our brothers in Christ, and there is a point where we need to say, hey, this isn't good, and we should talk about that, but it should be done in the light of grace as we've all been given. So I guess that'd be a good way to put it. There's either A, ultra, like not challenging, or B, there's a very lackluster, lacking grace sense right now in Christian media. And so not that Josh and I think we're the greatest guys in the world to do this, but the flip side is, well, sometimes God just gives us a desire in our hearts. I think we've both tried this a couple times by ourselves because the urge has been to utilize this amazing connectivity that we have today in our world that, man, you could be in the other side of the world right now listening to us, and we have no idea, and we'll probably never meet in person. Yet here we are as brothers and sisters in Christ, spurring each other onward to love and good deeds. And what an amazing opportunity we can do that. And it may not always be the case that we can do this. So let's take advantage of it while we can, right?
Yeah.
That we can see the harvest plentifully harvested, calling laborers into the harvest, right? And so that's kind of my heart in it. And I hope what you would expect and why you'd want to tune in and subscribe to this podcast. It should be everywhere that there are podcasts. So, and as well, it'll be on YouTube and Instagram and Facebook. But why you should subscribe and join in on this journey is because, man, we're hoping that we can spur each other onward, like we just discussed. We can be a light in the darkness, and that we can really create a community of people who are constantly lunging forward to be better. And I think, Josh, I don't know about you, but that is the number one thing that I think a lot of Christians are missing in their lives is we want contentment, but it's the opposite. It's not really contentment that a lot of Christians find themselves. It's apathy. It's an apathetic view that that this is just what it is. And they miss out on the fruit of what God has for us. They miss out on the greater journey. I mean, how important do you think it is, Josh, that a Christian always be growing and moving closer? Well, answer that. And then second off, why do we try to think how to word this well? So it's so important. Why is it so important that we're always growing? And then maybe what's the result of that if we're not? What's that do to the Christian life?
Man, I got to tell you, one of my bad, I don't know if, or whatever, however you want to describe this, I'm an internal processor. And so when you ask me a question, I'm like, oh man, I gotta think through this. I can't just answer. And so asking me, and I'm getting stressed, like very anxious as you're asking. So I don't know. Give me a script or something.
God, come up with me as we go, bro.
Yeah, give me like 2 weeks to prep. Let me see. First question why is it important? I mean, healthy things are growing. So sorry, now you're gonna make me laugh the whole time.
Oh, well, I'm sorry.
You're good.
Fogging my teeth up.
I don't glasses because anytime I stand up, as soon as I start talking, they fog up.
Yeah.
Anyway, that has nothing to do with that. All right, trying to get back into more serious. Why is it important for Christians to be growing? Is that what you're asking?
Yes.
All right. So I guess, what do you mean by, I would ask, clarifying, what do you mean by growing? Like growing in your relationship with the Lord? Like,
yeah, I'd say I'm going to hold it like a cool podcaster now because that light so bright in my eyes. We won't film this at 10 a.m. anymore because, or if I do, I have to do a different spot. But so I'd say, what is a healthy Christian is growing to be more like Christ. So, why is it that we see so many Christians who are stagnant and not growing? And so what is the symptoms of that maybe? And then also like, what is the ultimate, like, what is that? Man, I'm doing a bad job right now. So we know we should see so many Christians should be growing towards Christ, but unfortunately, symptomatically, we see them not moving. So what is the result of that essentially? As we're not reflecting Christ and growing more to be like him, because Christ is perfect. We're not perfect. Like our goal is not to be my goal is not to be like Josh. My goal is to be like Christ. And I could be like Josh as Josh is like Christ, and I could mimic him in that way. But it is that call to grow and be more like him ultimately.
Yeah.
So what do you think that is? And then what do you think the result of that apathy is?
Man, it's really hard to, so I don't know if we've talked about this. I've been talking about this a lot lately with somebody, just in local churches and Christians in general. And naturally, and this is probably a flaw that I need I'm praying for the Lord to take away or fix. is I'm naturally cynical. So I'm a glass half empty type guy. And there's reasons for that the Lord is graciously exposing now. My knee-jerk reaction is like, well, people don't love Jesus, that's not true.
Nope.
That's not fair. That's unloving to think that way. So why are they apathetic? Why are they not growing? Why are they not like zealous for gospel living? I want to give the benefit of the doubt and say take responsibility as a leader. Perhaps they just don't know what that looks like. They've never been shepherded to see that. And so, like, I just preached I don't last Sunday at the time of this recording, and it was about the Israelites recovering the centrality of God's word. So they're back in the land. They have Ezra read the law from early morning to midday. How many of our people in our churches, like they say, because I was talking about recovering that centrality, the efficiency, the sufficiency of God's word. And I'll ask a question, like, how many of y'all like want to know like God's word? You want to study God's word? You want to be in God's word? But for so many, they just don't know how. Like, they don't know what that looks like. They don't know. All right, if I open up Isaiah or Ezekiel, like, all right, some of it's easy, but dude, what in the world is he saying? I don't understand what this means. And so they just don't know. And lack of our leadership, that we haven't equipped the saints to go and do these things. So some of that, ultimately, it's a heart issue. I'm thinking through that. The Lord has to ignite that passion for him. Some of it's misplaced priorities. Some of it is, I do get frustrated at times where, I'm like, there's a heaven, there's a hell, there's a God. Christ is real. Came, he lived, he died, he was resurrected. Like, I believe what the Bible teaches to be true. And that has gripped my heart to where I'll get kind of frustrated. Like, have we missed that? Like, it's so easy for us to get caught up in the things of this world with our jobs and our friends and our schedules. And I'm not knocking any of those things. We're like, this is real. And there's coming a day when everyone will stand before God and give an account. And so it's a thing of priorities, because, I'll hear people talk about time to read God's word, or they don't have, the energy to do it. But then I said this in a sermon, I'll talk to men who will sit in a deer stand for hours, and I'm not knocking, I love deer hunting. And so I'll deer stand for hours and be good. Or they'll scroll through their phones, or they'll watch TV. And so I think some of it's a misplaced priorities. That's a hard issue. Ultimately, the answer is praying. I've been praying, not just in churches, is for us to recover that zeal for the gospel. I think of is Psalm 127, unless the Lord builds a house, those who build it labor in vain. And so I'm praying, God, we need you to build, and I can preach, I can teach, and we can shepherd, and we can do all these things. But unless you build this house, unless you put this, like, it's not going to be, I can't do it in and of myself. And if it's up to me, then it's going to burn out and fizzle. So I need the Lord to set on fire his people's heart. So I don't know. There's a million reasons why. But I want to say, take responsibility and say, maybe they just don't know what this looks like, or maybe they haven't been taught. That's one of the things I think through, like, church replanting, revitalization. Like, you can't expect from others what they've never been taught. Be patient and teach them. Like, if you're like, hey, you need to be fellowshipping and enjoying that community with your brothers and sisters, well, they've never been taught what that looks like. And so be patient with them, show them. Don't just expect them to be, have this meaningful membership immediately of what that looks like. I don't know. Another thing about me, so I'm an internal processor, and then I think out loud sometimes. So it's like a weird thing. Like,
I get it. I'm an external processor too, so I get you. But I'm not as much of an internalizer. It's all external for me.
Yeah.
I'm just boom, let me vomit this out to you, right? And I think you're dead on, Josh, because I think it was The Pleasures of God by Piper that I was reading recently, and he talks about that. I believe that's where I heard this quote, that our natural inclination is to drift away from God, not towards God, because we're sinful. And I think that so much of where we are as people is that we think to ourselves that we arrive at some point or another, we've made it in some spiritual sense. And that's when we see the falls of these great men of God, is because they think they've made it. When you hear a pastor talking about that he doesn't have a quiet time because he's too busy, that's just not acceptable behavior, right? Like, we've got to pursue Christ with our lives, because the moment we think we've made it, we've lost it all. I mean, we're ready. We're literally going straight for a horrible calamity, basically. I think that's part of it. And then I think you're right, Josh, too, about people don't know what to do. And this is just really, I think, encapsulates this. And I don't say this to be prideful and like, I just a pastor who, it's the Spirit moves, not us. But I was preaching a Discipleship Now retreat for youth ministry down in the southern part of the state. And I hadn't discussed with the youth pastor how he wanted me to handle the response time. So I got to the response time and I froze, because we just hadn't talked about this. And people have very keen views on how they think you should handle that. So I always like, when I'm in your church, I want to totally respect what you're wanting me to do. And so I kind of just extended the call, but didn't give any real marching orders, because I didn't know what he wanted me to do. So I stepped down and he came up to me and says, "Hey, bro, if you want to go call him, please just go back up even and just call him, whatever you think is good." So I walked back up, and the song had been going, several minutes at this point, and I paused in between a verse and I just extended the call. I said, if you want to give your life to Christ, if you're called to missions, if you're called to ministry, to ministry itself, whatever that may be, if God's just telling you to lay something down, this is the time. Come respond. The altar's open. Grab a leader. Just the general things. I'm not trying to be manipulative or hey, we're going to go because I think there's 10 of you in this room until 10 of you. None of that stuff, right? Just a simple, here's where you can go if you have a call, if you feel like God's moving in your life. And it was like the floodgates broke. Now the song, the time in which we naturally do this in church had already been going for, let's say, 4 minutes at this point. But it wasn't until we extended the call to these children, these kids, that they responded. Why? Because they didn't know what to do. They didn't know what to do. At some point, we thought that Christianity was so mainstream that we stopped telling people how to grow closer to Christ. It became just watch me and you'll learn, rather than, hey, come with me and I'll show you and you can watch me as well, right? And then that naturally has, I think, broadened all over to even us as pastors, where we just almost expect that we don't have to actually shepherd our flocks to move them closer to Christ. That somehow our programs and our policies and things like this, that this will be sufficient enough that people are going to flock to our churches. We don't even need to go out and share the gospel. And, it gets me sometimes how many pastors, we just had this student evangelism conference last week from when we recorded this. And the reality was that there were youth pastors, and we went door to door to simple evangelism, who did not want to knock on a door. And we're trying to find outs, coming up to me, trying to find outs so they wouldn't have to do it. Now, here's the thing, man. We've got to lead the charge. And I know it's uncomfortable. I don't always love doing it. It's scary, right? But the flip side is I can't expect my people to do what I won't do myself. And I think that's a big part. And then I think as members, you've got to want Jesus more than you want comfort. And I don't mean that loving Jesus has to be particularly uncomfortable. In fact, he's the great comforter, right? But it's what we do. And what we'll talk about when we talk about the unhurried pastor, he discusses in there is Psalms 84 talks about that the Lord will withhold no good thing from his people, right? But he really gets into we have to reevaluate what that good thing is. Why is this happening? Well, what am I? Okay, I have a family member who's going through some sickness. Okay, so what is God doing to draw me closer to himself in this time? How is God using this for his glory? Looking actively for it versus because of the prosperity gospelese that we speak now that seep so much into our church culture, a lot of times it feels as though we struggle to really understand what's good, and it's not what the world tells us, right? We want to feed our gut, and that's where we hear that their God is their stomachs, and that's where we become, right? We're very hungry in our own right to kind of get what we want. And I think that's the hard part. So, dude, that's definitely for me, I think, and that the result of that's what we're seeing. It's apathy. It's apathy. It's people who aren't hungering and thirsting for righteousness, but rather are really just comfortable coasting where we are because they don't know where to go next. And so it's a church and a pastoral issue. It's across the board. But ultimately, as you said, Josh, the only way we can get through this is prayer, because we can't change anyone's heart. Only Christ can. So, Dude, anything else on that, Josh?
No, I mean, I don't know. This fits in with it. It's one of the things too that I think we outsource much education to our people, which I'm a product of Baptist college. I'm a product of seminary, Southern Baptist Seminary. So I'm not knocking those things. I've benefited from both of them, and I appreciate them. But I think pastors are often so quick to be like, "Hey, just go." Like, you'll learn it from somewhere else, instead of, if there's so much that you can learn in seminary that's useful for like the average Christian, not just those in pastoral ministry. So that's one of the things I'm thinking about is, like, how can I take that and bring it to my people here so they don't have to go pay thousands of dollars? Like, the Lord bless me, I got that education. Now let me just reproduce that to others. Like, teach them New Testament, Old Testament surveys, teach them evangelism, teach them those things, for other people to do it, because they're gonna learn from someone. Might as well be you as their pastor. But I don't know. I'm just gonna keep rambling.
Yeah. No, that's it. I think you're right. I think we think to ourselves, we live in the era of experts. Like they find with Gen Z. Gen Z is actually super apt to go and find who they think is an expert. And that's just someone with a microphone to them, oftentimes, a camera and a microphone. So they'll think that this person, so they have FOMO. And I think even though our older people will find themselves in this situation where they're not like, okay, they'll just go get a book or do something, watch it. But like they still think that, well, you need this to go there. We do this small group, our children's ministry rather does this curriculum. And my mom actually was talking to our leaders about it. And she said, listen, I know that you're thinking to yourself, these are big topics for our 3rd through 3-year-olds all the way up through 5th graders to learn. Like, these are theological terms. But she said the idea of this is that these big complex terms, they're going to hear from when they're 3 and 5 all the way up, so that our older people may not even know what these terms mean. They've had them in their lives since they were a little kid, and that's ingrained in them. And I think that oftentimes we feel like we somehow have to hit some extra echelon of Christian and Christianese, or whatever you want to say, that we can begin to talk about these doctrinal terms and then apply them. And because of that, I think we really short-sight ourselves and our people to not want to. So I think simplifying education is a big deal, where it's actually like, hey, just come and follow me, and not to say I'm actively thinking about going and getting some more education myself. Don't hear Josh or I saying you shouldn't go to seminary, because we love Christian education. The point is, it shouldn't be the only option to get Christian education. Like, we can do that in the church as well. It'd be better that we send our pastors to there already equipped for much of the good work that they're going to do, and then they're just getting that extra polishing and maybe some of that the disciplines of higher education, versus, hey, you just got saved, and so you just need to go to seminary, bro. Like, if you feel like you're called to ministry, just go to seminary. It's like, well, maybe there's other steps we can do before then.
Right.
Because where our context is right now, we need more pastors and elders that are in rural context, where we can't have a guy who's probably gone to seminary. He can't afford it because seminary costs so much. And so with that, if you want to support Josh and I Seminary Fund, please go to patreon.com. I'm just joking.
I was like, man, do we have a Patreon?
We can get one, bro. We can get one.
There you go.
But no, anyways, dude, what a good conversation. We're coming up to our time here today, but man, Josh, what a fun podcast. We'll be back next week, and we're going to be discussing, actually, I'll be available now because we're going to put these out several in a row. But next time we're going to be talking about how do you find a good church in 2024, almost 2025. Actually, it'll probably be 25 whenever this comes out. And all of this, I think my 15-month-old just found the door. There's my wife grabbing her like that. No. But dude, she's excited. But we're going to come back, talk about, how do we find a good church? How do we navigate all of the different Baptists? There's 20,000 different kinds of Baptists in America, pretty much. There's Christian, then there's all the different versions of that, and then there's Methodist and the different versions of that now, and the list can just go on and on. So what does a Bible-believing church look like, and how do you find one? And if you do, what should you do once you're there?
Right on. So,
Josh, any final words for the inaugural podcast, brother?
No, I'm excited. Hopefully it's more than just our wives and mothers.
Hopefully.
But I think, I'm excited
I'm so thankful for you watching this.
Yeah, you should have a tattoo. Love you, Mom.
There we go.
Yeah. No, I'm excited.
Oh, man. It's good. Hey, you see our social handles down there. If you want to follow us on Instagram or somewhere else, look up Sojourn Podcast on pretty much most of the social media platforms other than TikTok, because I just don't mess with TikTok.
Yeah.
I don't. None of that junk. But other than that, you could probably find us there and subscribe to the podcast. And if you liked it, maybe give us a 5-star rating and help us out there as well. So God bless, and we will see you as we sojourn together next week. Heyo. Take care, guys.